It's a storage facility in Washington State, 258 units, 32,000 square feet
Okay.
of rentable space. The asking price was $3.3 million. It was a fully seller financed offer.
People say you're not able to buy storage with no money out of your pocket. How much money have you put out of your pocket? Zero. What's the thought process behind bringing on an equity partner?
The intimidation factor of getting into commercial real estate with a $3 million facility
Oh my man.
on my own.
Oof, you just unlocked a whole nother episode for us. The fact that you can get into this deal with no money out of your pocket and cash flow $2,000 a month. There's no reason, if I were in your shoes, you shouldn't be on that phone with the broker ASAP, like today. My name's Alex Pardo. I'm excited to bring you back into this series of talks and conversations and coaching calls effectively that we have just been hitting the record button on with Dan Wenzel, who is somebody who I started working with, probably 7, 8, 9, 10 months ago or so. And I challenged him and I said, hey, would you be willing to share your journey? And let's document the process of you pursuing your very first storage deal. And to Dan's credit, he knew he was going to be able to grow from this experience. He also knew he was going to be able to help you, the person watching and listening. And so hopefully you have been plugged in, following along in this journey, because there's been so many ups and downs. There's been a lot of highs. There's been moments that have been challenging. And one of those moments was last week. If you had an opportunity to plug in and hear the conversation last week, you know that Dan celebrated the birth of his daughter, which is a massive win. And with that, with good reason, he was spending a lot of time with her, with his wife, with his other daughter, and just carving out a lot of focus time, quality time with his family, which is what I wanted and which is what he wanted. However, at some point, Dan was feeling like he wasn't gaining the kind of, like, momentum had completely stalled out. Like it stopped. He wasn't really gaining progress. One of the things Tony Robbins said years ago that always stuck with me is that progress equals happiness. And whenever you feel like you're in quicksand, or if you're treading water, or you're just stuck, figure out where your right next step is and just do that, because all you're trying to do is gain the train of momentum going. That's all you want to do. And so last week, we kind of had a come to Jesus moment, and we unpacked everything Dan was feeling physically, mentally, emotionally, and we just hit the reset button, and we kind of gave him like a prescription, like, hey, don't worry about the work that's built up. Treat everything from this point forward. And I think too many people spend time and energy looking back, beating themselves up, harboring feelings of guilt or shame, or feeling less than, and feeling like they're not progressing the way they want to. Maybe it's even a comparison game. Maybe you can relate to any of what I've just shared, or possibly all of it. And I think for Dan, some of that was at play. And so I think we came up with a solid game plan, and I haven't spoken to him since then. So in a moment, I'm going to bring his voice into this conversation so that he can give us not just an update, but I always want to start celebrating the wins, no matter how big or small they are. So Dan, brother, with that being said, man, welcome back. I'm looking forward to hearing some updates. Before we do that, hit us with some wins, man. I don't care if there's small wins, but there's plenty of things we can celebrate on the business side of things as it relates to your storage business. So give me 2 or 3 quick wins before we you share with us some updates since the last conversation.
Yeah, Alex, thanks. I have a couple small wins here to get back on track and get some momentum going again. And the first one I'd say has been having some good conversations with owners, and it feels good to have some of those and talk to owners I've spoken with before, and even make a handful of cold calls. Even though another win, I guess, could be, even though I've had my VA who's been still churning out calls for me, and even as I haven't been at my computer looking for storage facilities as often. But I guess that could be 2 wins. And then another would be, there's a facility I made an offer on 3 or 4 months ago, maybe even 2 or 3 months ago, that fell out of contract, that I just spoke with the broker about this morning, and plan to dive into that deal a little bit more to see if there's a way to make something work with that one. And I have a solid relationship with that broker, and he even told me the price and terms of that offer that fell out of contract. So a few small wins there.
Amazing, man. Amazing. And I would say those aren't small wins. And even if they are, if you consider them small wins, the big win doesn't happen without an accumulation of a bunch of small wins, right? The person that achieves a six pack or a certain weight or a certain body fat or closing their first storage deal, you don't just wake up and say, I want that, and you get it. No, it's a series of small wins that stack up consistently over time. So that's why I love to celebrate. And on our Storage Wins community coaching calls, we always start with wins because it lays the foundation. It's good vibes and energy. And I think there's too many people that are demanding of your time, energy, and attention, and that people focus on the lack or the gap and not necessarily the gains. And so that's why I want to start with that. Let me throw one other potential win out there. Do you feel better today than you did a week ago on our last conversation? At least when we started the conversation.
Slightly better.
Okay. All right. Cool, man. Well, look, again, we're gonna stay in the gains, not the gap. So we're gonna celebrate,
Yeah,
and we're gonna continue to build from it. So even though last week's call was a reset call, and by the way, was that call helpful for you?
it was.
Okay. So it doesn't mean we drank a magic potion. It's not an elixir that like everything is fixed. Like, no, we still got to roll up our sleeves, do the work, sweep the floors, etc. Right. And to your credit, you've leaned into it. So with that said, man, I want to go ahead and dive into some updates. And you shared some of them, like you've re-engaged with some owners. There's an opportunity that has fallen out of contract that now a door has cracked open for you. What other updates since our last conversation? Like, have you been able to build on some of the things that we talked about last week in terms of like not looking back at all the workload that had built up during the 2, 3, 4 weeks where you weren't really working, and just treating it like a blank slate, like a fresh page, and it's like you're the author, you get to start from chapter 1 again.
Yeah, the biggest takeaways from the last episode were huge for my mindset getting back into this. The the idea to not try to fix the system and to not have a perfect place to start again, since my momentum has really stalled.
Yeah.
It's just pick somewhere and start. And that mindset has been really helpful,
Great, man.
and it's helped me to at least make some calls. I've still been pulled away from with the baby quite a bit, um, and that's of course okay and to be expected.
That's
Um,
awesome.
but that's the biggest takeaway
Yeah.
from the last episode.
Yeah. And brother, I'm not going to tell you to do anything different. So when you get pulled away, it's a blessing. That time you only have once. You don't get it back, and you're already a father. You had you have an older daughter, and so you already know what that's like, man. So, but here's the great thing, man. I truly believe we live in an and world, not an either or world. Meaning, we get to be present and enjoy those holy moments, as a friend of mine calls it, and we can build our business and we can progress and we can grow, because I truly believe God created us to create and be producers, not to just sit back and consume and be lazy. He gave us 2 hands and 2 feet, and He gave us a powerful mind to create and to work and to impact others, and to build, to build something awesome. And that's what you're in the process of doing. When you take that away from somebody like you kind of start to die inside. And so I think we can have both, man. I believe we can have both. Why are you laughing? What's up? Dad's over there, like, I'm just looking at him, and
It
Dad's
does.
like smiling. And
It hurts. It hurts to be not to feel torn, but just to feel my time divided so much. It's such a drastic change that it's two things that I really want to spend the time with the baby and to spend the time on storage. And
do you
it's
believe you do you
finding the
believe
right
both are
balance.
possible?
It's hard to find that place right now because my momentum is really slowly picking back up.
Okay. Well, Well, by I think by evidence of the fact that your momentum is picking up, it already
Right.
should prove to you that you can have both, because you didn't
Yeah.
have that momentum a week ago, and now you
Mhm.
do. Now you're judging that you'd like to have more momentum and more progress, but I also just you always have to filter, man, and ask yourself: are the thoughts you have, the emotions you feel, do they serve you or do they hold you back? And we get to pick and choose. Now you're human, dude. You're gonna have certain emotions. The question is what meaning do you attach to those things? And then what do we want to do moving forward? Because life isn't going to get easier. Things aren't always going to be easy, but that's not the prayer you should be having. It's how do you continue to grow and get stronger and persevere, right? I just had a friend of mine who has never ran a marathon, never ran a half marathon. He just completed on Sunday morning the 100-mile ultra. He ran
What?
100 miles consecutively. I think it took him 31 or 32 hours. He's in a lot of
Wow.
pain. Talking blisters. I'm talking cramps. I mean, his body's going through it. This is somebody who had never run a half marathon, but he has this mindset where you should do. Humans need to do hard things to prove to yourself that you can do it. And the mind, it's as much mental as it is physical. Um, and so now, am I suggesting you go out and do a 100-mile race? No, that's not necessarily what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, like, what you believe you can achieve, more times than not, you can. Might not happen on your watch or your timeline, but if you just believe you, and he was committed from day one. He's like, I'm doing this, and he did it. He did it. He crossed the finish line. He crossed, in a lot of pain, but he did it. And it was inspiring to watch. It just reminds me of, like, what each and every one of us are capable of when we set our minds to it, and we do that. We commit to the work. We commit to the process.
That's incredible.
So I wanted to share that with you because I wasn't planning on sharing that, but it just, as I'm hearing you talk, Dan, like you're in a tough season now. You're also in a season of many blessings. You just had a daughter, which is incredible. And so I don't want you to lose sight of that. And every time you look into her eyes, aside from the love you feel as a father and everything else, that's the most powerful why you could possibly ever have. Right. And so I want that to fuel you, and don't judge yourself over the lack, don't judge yourself over the speed of the progress you're currently making. You want it to be faster. And there are certain things that we'll continue to work on here that can help you be more efficient and effective with your time. So enough of all that. I want to start to get tactical and practical here so that it helps those following along in your journey. Let's jump into whatever deal. I know you've had some meaningful conversations with storage owners, and you mentioned one deal that fell out of contract that you were looking at prior. Where do we want to dive in? I'll let you kind of take the lead from here.
Um, I don't know if you want to run through numbers on a spreadsheet, or I can share about the deal with you, what it is, the price, and
Yeah,
unit.
just share high level, because keep in mind, for those listening that might not be able to watch it, it's gonna be hard to follow along if you're showing a spreadsheet. So let's just talk.
Right.
Let's talk big. I mean, I want to answer your questions, and I want to get tactical with it. But let's not dive into the spreadsheet, because that's not going to be great for an audio experience. Or
Right.
even somebody watching it might just be tough to like hone in on everything. So yeah, first, why don't you do this? Let's orient the person watching and listening, and like, where did the deal come from? How'd you find it? How have you gotten to this point? Like, give us the 2-minute trailer of this deal.
Yeah, it's a storage facility in Washington State, and it's 258 units, 32,000 square feet
Okay.
of rentable space, and
And where where
it's
did where did this opportunity come from?
it came from a VA cold call
Okay, fantastic, man. And
off market.
was this opportunity part of like your buy box blueprint, or is this outside of your buy box and it's potentially a wholesale opportunity?
Yeah, this is one that I would ideally like to take down
Okay.
and run myself.
Okay. So you said it was 33,000 square feet or 32?
Yeah, 32.
Okay. 32,000 square feet. Do you know what the current occupancy is?
Currently 96%.
Okay. So what does that tell you right out of the gate at night if the owner's at 96% occupancy?
I lied. 82% occupancy.
Okay. So 82%.
A little bit different.
Either way, it's healthy. Had it been 96%, what would that have told you?
Their rates are too high. Or
Exactly.
too low, I'm sorry.
Rates are too low, which means there's an
Yeah.
opportunity to raise rates. Sometimes we
Right.
talk, Dan and I will talk to storage owners that brag about being 100% occupied or 96, 95, and that's just probably a strong indication that they haven't tested the market rates in a while. They're probably leaving some money on the table. I think 85, maybe 88 to 90% is a good sweet spot. You always want some available units, and you always want to be putting upward pressure on the market street rates. So this facility is currently at 82% occupancy. Do you have any data on this year's 2025's, or I shouldn't say this year. People are going to be listening to this in 2026 and beyond, but last year, which would be 2025, last year's revenue, and even 2024 revenue. Do you have those numbers?
I'm looking for revenue, and I'm actually not sure of that.
Well, while you're looking, continue to walk us through what is it about this deal that appealed to you? Like, walk us through where you think the opportunity is. Walk us through where the upside lies. Like, just paint a picture of what makes this a potentially strong opportunity. I'd love to learn more about the seller situation, their asking price, why they want to sell, and then we'll start to dig into the numbers a little bit.
Yep. So I did find it here. The annualized revenue, it's on schedule to do 275,000 this year revenue,
So that'll be 2025 revenue about 275.
and the rates are currently about 25 to 30% under market. It's a simple market. Um, there's really one big player that I see in the local market.
When you say big player, are you talking about a REIT like a Public Storage, CubeSmart, Extra Space,
Yeah, it's not one of those, but it's another one that
like an
it's
institutional player?
a larger facility, a larger
Okay,
company that has multiple locations across the country.
got it. How would you, even excluding that particular operator, how would you say the level of sophistication is in the market on a scale of 1 to 5? 5 being, I mean, they are as sophisticated as they get. 1 is they don't know what the world they're doing.
It's
There's no right or wrong. Just what do you think?
maybe a 3.
A 3? Okay.
There are a lot of facilities that have very simple websites, or several that have no website.
Okay. Okay, got it. By the way, when I hear numbers like $275,000 in revenue in 2025 on a 32,000 square foot facility, that indicates pretty healthy rates. That's
Yeah, it's a strong.
yeah, that seems pretty strong. Okay. And is this a cash flow play for you? Is it more of an equity upside play, maybe a hybrid? Like, talk to me about one of the things that's important whenever we look at opportunities, especially before we buy, is we determine the exit. We determine, like, what's the play that we're running here, right? Are we handing the ball off to the running back, or are we throwing it, a deep post to the wide receiver? And those that don't know football or follow me have no idea what I'm talking about. But basically, what's the play that we're going to run here? Is this for cash flow? Is it for upside? Maybe it's a hybrid, but what do you said you want to take this down, own and operate. Tell me about the potential future value of this.
The play for this facility would be as a cash flow play. There's some upside on equity, but mainly it's cash flow, and it's year 1 projected, after updating some operations with the facility, bringing the rates up to market, and implementing tenant protection. It would have about 80 grand net cash flow after debt service in year 1.
Okay.
And going
All
up
right.
to about 130,000 in year 5.
Okay, so I want you to break that down in layman's terms for somebody who may have just stumbled on this show and they don't know what, like, so when you say 80 to 130,000 in net cash flow after debt service. In fact, let me just kind of take the lead here and you tell me where I might be off. You have revenue, right, which is your gross rents, any sales, things of that nature. You have your revenue. You have expenses, which in storage, depending on the size of the facility, depending on the market, let's just call it somewhere between 35 to 40% operating expense ratio or operating expense load, right? So that's a percentage of gross revenue. And then that revenue minus expenses gives you your net operating income, your NOI. Now, NOI does not take into account debt service. So if you're going to go to a bank or a lender and you're going to borrow a certain amount of the money to buy the facility, let's call it 70%. Is pretty common where you put down 30% or somebody puts down 30%. A small local bank or an institution will finance 70% of the purchase price. Now, when they finance you, you're going to have what's called debt service. It means every single month you're going to owe them X amount of dollars. What Dan is saying is that after you pay the bank, the lender, their debt service for the year, there is net cash flow of 80 grand. Right? So what is that like? That's like a little bit over $7,000 a month in your pocket. Is that right?
That sounds about right.
That sounds about right. Give or take, whatever. I'm not going to bust out a calculator here, but whatever the math is, think about what's on one facility. What would 7 grand a month in net cash flow do in your world right now?
For a lot of confidence.
Well, aside from build a lot of confidence, that'll pay a lot of bills. I mean, there's some people I talk to that, 7 grand will take care of their monthly nut. That'll take care of like all their household expenses. Now you might be listening to you and maybe you need double that or maybe you need triple that. It doesn't really matter. That's one storage facility. Okay. Now, one thing we need to take into account here is, and Dan, I don't know, you tell me if I'm wrong. There's different ways to layer on the financing to figure out how to get to the net cash flow. If you have the 30% down and you're going to finance 70% of it, then great. Now you may need to borrow that 30%, or you may need to bring on a partner, somebody who's going to put the money into the deal. When you say 80% like net cash flow after debt service, is that already taking into account you borrowing the 30% that you need from a private lender? Is that if you were going to bring on somebody as an equity partner, meaning they were going to fund the down payment and maybe some of the money you needed to put into the facility to take out some equity in the deal? Like, how are you thinking of structuring it, and what got you to that 80 to 130 grand of net cash flow?
This would be set up by bringing in an equity partner on this one.
Okay. Could you just take a minute or two for those that are not quite sure how that works? Like, when you look at a deal, how do you determine if it makes sense to bring on an equity partner, meaning somebody who's going to put money into the deal in exchange for some ownership in the business, in the facility? That's option A. Option B is bringing on a private lender, either to fund all or part of the purchase price. And it's pretty common to maybe bring on a private lender to fund the down payment. It could be a hybrid, by the way. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. If you go back to season 1 of Storage Wins, we talked about a lot of different ways that you can finance and fund these storage facilities. But I'm just curious, man, like in your words, how do you think through that? Like what are some practical steps or advice that you could share with people when it comes to thinking through how to evaluate an opportunity in terms of debt or equity?
Initially, I'll run it as if I'm going to purchase the facility myself and bring the cash to the table and own 100% of it. And then I'll look at what the net cash flow after debt service is that we just talked about, and then think about if I want to own this without bringing in an equity partner, how much would the private money lender cost me each month or each year?
Yeah.
And that money would be coming out of that net cash flow after debt service. So can that afford to pay what would typically be or often be interest-only payments to a private money lender that can range around 10 or 12% oftentimes. Um, and so they'd be interest-only payments if I'm borrowing $500,000 and paying interest-only payments at 5%. Whatever that math works out to, would that number would that payment to them would come off of the net cash flow after debt
Yeah.
service.
So let's get, so in this particular case, how much down payment money would you need? Plus CapEx. CapEx being capital expenditures, the money that you would need to put into the facility to improve it operationally. So how much money are we talking? Just ballpark. It doesn't.
750,000 for this one.
700. Okay, so this is a perfect example, I think, of why Dan, I think, is leaning towards bringing on an equity partner and giving up ownership in the deal versus bringing on a private lender. Let's do this, Dan. You said the revenue is 275, and this is as is. This is not even like once you raise the rate. So let's just look at as is, because whenever I look at an opportunity, I like to make the offer based on what it's generating today. I will buy on pro forma. I'm just not going to pay for pro forma. In other words, if it could be 400,000 in revenue, I'm not going to make an offer based on that future 400. That is value the current owner hasn't created. I'm going to make the offer more slanted and based towards what it's currently producing. So let's just assume, Dan, for the sake of this conversation, your operating expense ratio is going to be 37%. Is that fair?
37.
37%.
Yeah.
Let's just use 37. Okay. So I'm going to do 275,000 and I'm going to back out the 37% expense ratio. Okay. Which means I'm going to multiply it by 63%. Or if you want to go a little longer, you can do 275,000 times 1 minus 0.37. It's going to get you to the same number. Okay. So that's going to give me a projected net operating income of 173,250. Again, I'm just using current revenue. I'm not looking yet at what the revenue could be in a year's time once I raise the rates, add some fee income, etc. What do you project so how would you finance this? Bank financing at 70%?
Bank financing, I ran it actually at 80%.
Okay.
Thinking loan terms are getting better, and
maybe. I'm not saying it's
maybe
impossible.
that's aggressive.
Yeah, maybe it's a little. I want to see if the deal works. I mean, look, it's not impossible, but let's run the numbers at 70%. Okay. So we already know that $173,250 is the projected net operating income. Now, remember what I told you. Revenue minus expenses gives us our NOI. That does not take into account debt service. To get to cash flow, now we're going to subtract our annual debt service from that 173, and that is going to tell us the net cash flow that's going into HIP National Bank, right, in our pocket. So what if you're financing 70% of the purchase price, which is how much? How much does the seller want?
The asking price was 3.3 million.
Okay, asking
And
price.
they were under contract at 3 million.
Okay, and it fell out of contract.
It fell out of contract.
Okay, so
actually it was a fully seller financed offer, so there's flexibility there to negotiate the terms outside of the rigidity of the bank loan.
Okay, so they were. Let me recap because you said a lot there. They were asking 3.3. They ultimately accepted an offer at 3 million. So their asking price was 3.3, but it's really 3, right? For all intents and purposes. It might even be less. And they, to your knowledge, they were financing, they were seller financing 100% of that purchase price?
100%.
Okay, beautiful. Amazing. Okay. And that would be the same. So you wouldn't be getting a bank loan on this, right? If they're willing to seller finance, why would you get a bank loan? Unless they're asking 10% interest or something crazy, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
5% is what they did it at.
So 5%. Okay, we're cooking here. And that's 5% interest only. Is there amortization?
It was interest only for 5 years.
Okay, so check this out, guys. If you take out your calculator, you just do 3 million times 5%. That's $150,000 in annual. Fact check me on this, Dan. That's
Yep.
$150,000 in annual debt service payments.
That's what I see.
Okay. So then you don't need an equity partner for this. Right? Like you mentioned you were thinking of bringing on an equity partner. Let me just run you through the math that I just ran to make sure I'm not missing something. If your revenue is $275,000 and the operating expense ratio is 37%, that gets you to a net operating income with the current revenue, the 2025 revenue of $173,250, right? If you step in Dan Wenzel Incorporated or whatever entity you're going to buy this thing in, and the seller finances the same $3 million at 5%, your annual debt service payment's $150,000. So based on my math, $173,250 of NOI minus your $150,000 of annual debt service payments to the seller, how much money have you put out of your pocket? Zero, because you're financing 100% of the purchase price. That gives you net cash flow of $23,250, or basically $2,000 a month in your pocket.
Yep.
And people say you're not able to buy storage with no money out of your pocket. Perfect example. You found a seller who's willing to offer 100% seller financing. You can get into this deal, and if you do nothing else and you continue to operate it the way they're operating it, which you're not, you're going to operate it better, you're making about $2,000 a month.
Yep.
What's the thought process behind bringing on an equity partner?
The intimidation factor of getting into commercial real estate with a $3 million facility
Oh my man!
on my own.
Oof, you just unlocked a whole nother episode for us. All right, so look, so what Dan is basically saying is, hey, I'm intimidated by this. There's some fear and uncertainty here, and I want to offset that by giving somebody ownership in the deal in exchange for them carrying some of this risk. So it's everybody's got a different risk profile. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like, look, there's nothing worth a good night's rest, right? Like if you ask some people, if you ask one of my mentors, he says, success, I define success as a good night's rest. In other words, peace. And I want you to really one of the things I always do, and Dan, you've heard me say this a million times, but let me just be thorough and comprehensive here. Whenever I look at an opportunity, I look at the likely scenario, I look at the worst case scenario, and I look at the best case scenario. I will never buy on the best case scenario. I will always buy if I'm comfortable with the worst case scenario, knowing that I'm likely going to achieve the most probable likely scenario. In this case, now, I haven't looked at the market. All I know is what Dan has shared with me. But it sounds to me like the worst case scenario is operating at what you're currently operating at. Now, look, could the market rates go down? Could things happen? Of course. Okay, so maybe the worst case scenario is a little bit less than what they're currently doing. But the likely scenario is you can probably pop the rates up a bit. I'm not going to let's forget about the best case scenario. So if I just evaluate the deal based on the worst case, right? You're positive 23,000 and change in net cash flow.
Yeah.
All right. So, by the way, I'm certain there's people listening to us right now, and you're probably going to be getting hit up, and people are like, "Hey, man, I'll partner with you on that deal. Like, what do you got? Like, hey, whatever happened to that opportunity?" I can already see it. I am telling you. In fact, when it happens and people start messaging you, you need to text me or call me and let me know. Okay. That, my friend, without even factoring what it could be, that, my friend, is a pretty decent deal. Why? Because you got favorable terms. You got good terms. 5%, at least at the time of this recording, is below the industry rates of what, 6.5 to 7, right? Maybe even a little bit more. No, I'd love to see if we can negotiate and get a little bit of a longer term. If we can get 7, 8, or even 10 years, you'd be in a great spot. So that might be worth. I think that's definitely worth the conversation, at least inquiring. Uh, but brother, the fact that you can get into this deal with no money out of your pocket and cash flow $2,000 a month. Okay, now let's do this. What is the future upside? What could the revenue be, conservatively speaking, once you raise the rates? And let's say that you raise the rates not even to like the top of the market, maybe slightly below the average of the market. I just want to be conservative. Just really quick, what would that do to your annual revenue? It would take you from 275 to what? Because we're going to rerun these numbers now.
Yeah, I did a few scenarios, and the most conservative scenario brought it to 325,000 in year one.
Woo. We're cooking, man. We're cooking, dude. You said 325,000, and that's conservatively speaking.
That's the most conservative. I did it at 50% tenant protection penetration, and raising rates. Honestly, rates are really far under market.
Okay,
and
let's just pause there. By the way, tenant protection is like if the customers come in and they want to use your tenant protection so that it, typically speaking, it'll insure up to $2,000 of the contents in the unit. And like in our case, they pay $14 a month for that, and we get 70% of that revenue. So let's just say I think we get like $9 to $10 a month per unit per customer. So that's just extra revenue. So you said $325,000. Now remember what I told you, we're using a 37% operating expense ratio. So I'm going to now do 325,000 times 0.63 or 6 times 63%. That gets me to 204,750. What was your annual debt service payment, Dan? At 5% interest on a $3 million interest only.
150,000.
So 204,750 minus 150. My calculator tells me you're looking at $54,750 in net positive cash flow, or $4,562.50 in monthly net cash flow going into Dan Wenzel's Hip National Bank.
Hip National Bank, I love that.
How does $4,500, almost $4,600 a month, once you raise the rates and implement some fee income, which it might take you 6 to 12 months to get there. But if I told you, hey, you can get into this deal, 32,000 square foot facility, we'll talk about the market and demographics in a moment. But if I told you that you can get into that with no money out of your pocket, great seller finance terms, from day one, you should be cash flowing just under $2,000 a month. Within 12 months, give or take, maybe less, maybe a little more, within 12 months, that number is more like $4,600 a month in net cash flow. How do you feel about that?
Who wouldn't feel awesome about that?
Now, dude, if you want to bring somebody in and give them a piece of that, to give you the warm and fuzzies, like, you know, I mean, who am I to get in your way? But I want you to know that you are more than capable of taking this on and doing this.
Yeah.
You are more than capable.
If it was maybe my second or third or fourth facility, I would feel a lot more confident doing that. Honestly, it's just a hedge of risk, a hedge of
okay, so
fully understanding running the business, actually running one of these.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, on paper, it looks fantastic.
Yeah. And look, to your point.
Yeah.
To your point, like there's always going to be some uncertainty. We talked about this, Dan, recently on one of our Storage Wins calls, where you can talk to the most experienced, like, who was it? There was somebody in our community that was talking about, like, he talked to a guy that owns like a ton of facilities, and he still calls this Storage Wins member to run things by him. Because you always want a fresh set of eyes. There's always going to be like, no one deal is the exact same. It's not a cookie cutter business. Different markets, there's just a lot of different factors and variables and things to consider. So that's something we can work on, man. Here's the point. I don't think you can go wrong, at least based on what you've shared with me. Now, we're not going to do this on the podcast, but I'd want to drill down and dig into the market, make sure strong demographics, understand the supply and demand, because that's really important. You can be an average to mediocre storage operator And if I put you in a great market that is undersupplied and has more demand for storage, you're gonna kick
Right.
butt. You could be an awesome operator, and I put you in an oversaturated or oversupplied market with heavy REIT presence and all the like, and you're probably going to struggle. So we're going to want to stress test the market, uh, the competition, all that. But brother, on paper right now, it's a solid deal.
This
Solid
is
deal.
one of them that I was disappointed to see go under contract. It was one of
Okay.
them I liked that I just couldn't quite get to their price, and I didn't
So
know
I
where they really wanted to be, and then it went to market and got under contract pretty quickly.
and this is the one that you presented on the storage wins call, right? That you were feeling like, remember you were feeling the weight of having lost a deal,
Um,
or is that a
it
different one?
was there were two. This was
Okay.
one of them. There was another one too.
Okay, so let's do this because I don't want to spend any more time on the podcast. I want you on the phone with the seller, like in the next 3 minutes. What was the last conversation with the seller, and where did you leave off with them?
It was the broker since this one went to market, and the conversation with the broker was um, actually there's a little more to this facility about is it in a flood plain or a flood path and how's that going to affect insurance, and they're trying to figure out from the local city flood board of which this seller is actually part of. So it gets a little hairy with some of the stuff the broker was sharing with me, that they need to figure out probably before anybody will purchase this facility. But the broker was telling me about that, and I told him I would just run through the numbers after he shared the offer that fell out of contract, the price and terms, and then I get back to him.
Look, whenever you make an offer, I want you to feel good about the offer. And when we make an offer and we get an LOI, a letter of intent, or a purchase and sale agreement signed and executed, it's because we have every intention of following through and closing. Okay. That is information that I don't want you to be sitting on the sideline waiting for somebody to uncover before you take action. You already know this deal works on paper just based on what they're asking and based on the terms they're offering. Now, the one thing I'd
Those
like to,
exact terms.
I mean, we just ran the numbers based on
Yeah.
what they're asking, assuming all the data is accurate, which by the way, you're going to have a 30 to 45 or even maybe 60-day due diligence period where you're going to be able to cross check all this, dot your I's, cross your T's, go out there, do on site due diligence. I want you to control this deal. I want you to come to an
Yeah.
agreement with them. Now, the one thing that I might encourage you to see if you can get a little better on is the term of the loan.
Yeah.
If you could stretch that out to 8-10 years, I think you're golden. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's a deal breaker if it stays at 5, but just know that like I'm on the back. Well, I got 3 years left, but that's because I baked in an extension. But if I had it not been for that extension in 2 years, my note would be due on my Florida facility. And so 5 years can come around pretty quickly, you know, especially if the exit strategy you're relying on is to sell it. You know, sometimes these assets can take a little bit longer to sell. Now, if you're planning on refi, then, you know, you're kind of at the mercy of refining if it makes sense rate wise. But why would you refi if you're at a 5%? I don't think we're dipping below 5% anytime soon.
Right.
I mean, I could be wrong, but that's just my opinion. So you're probably not going to refi it. Now, maybe you could if you raise the rents and, you know, maybe rates are close to 5%, or, you know, you got to go up a little bit just to like get out of it, and you're coming up on that time. But who knows what can happen between now and the next 60 months or whatever. Okay. So if you can extend that note, the term, I think you're putting yourself in a better position. You're just giving yourself more breathing room and flexibility to execute. You don't need an equity partner. If you want to discuss an equity partner, then, you know, then that's a conversation obviously we can have, and we can figure out the right partner. But yeah, man, if everything checks out with the market and the competition, this is a solid deal. Like, there's no reason, if I were in your shoes, you shouldn't be on that phone with the broker ASAP, like today.
Will do. Yeah.
And like in a non, what's the word? Eager, willing.
urgent.
Yeah,
Yeah,
dude, like play it cool. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But internally, you want to act with a sense of urgency to get this, because
yeah.
trust your gut and trust your numbers, man. Like, you know what you're doing. We've looked at enough opportunities where, based on the numbers we just ran, now granted, I haven't asked you about like CapEx and like, hey, do you got to put on new roofs in the next 3 to 5 years? Like, there's a lot more, but for the purposes of our conversation today on the show, I want you to move towards getting this under contract.
Yeah.
You might, and I'm not even telling you, you might even be able to get it at a lower price. You might even be
Right.
able to get it at 2.7, 2.8, maybe 2.9. This
That was where my original offer was. It
okay.
was around 2.8.
This is where some of the nuance comes in, and you have to. I'm not in the conversation with Dan, and so like I'm not giving him black and white, like, hey, this is what I want you to come in at. But based on the conversations you've had with the broker, based on the relationship you've built, based on some of what's been said, what hasn't been said, gauging the seller's motivation, how long have they been trying to sell this property? How long were they under contract? Like, you may be able to get a better deal if you can assure the seller of certainty when it comes to closing.
That's what happened with the previous buyer. It was their first facility. They were under contract to put $1 million down, and they couldn't fund it. They couldn't find the money.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, we've been going for 46, 47 minutes or so. I want to start to put a bow on this one, man. Here's what I want to do. I want you to take fast action on this. Not eager, you're not the motivated buyer. Play it cool, man. Like, but I want you to move on this. I don't want you to like slow play this one.
Yeah.
And then I want to hear some updates, and we can dig a little bit deeper on this one and maybe the other one on our next call. All right.
The plan.
So really quick to wrap us up in 30 seconds or less. What is your right next step?
Get on the phone with the broker.
All right, and
act cool.
Okay. Yeah, man, just be yourself, but I want you to move towards the whole insurance thing. Let's figure that out during due diligence. I mean,
right.
You've run the numbers enough. This is not your first time looking at the deal. Like, don't make the mistake I did on my first deal where I almost fumbled the bag, quote unquote, and I tried to dot every I and cross every T before going under contract. Yeah. Trust that during due diligence, you can uncover some of that, but during due diligence, now you control it.
Yeah.
Okay.
One last question. Length of the contract period. 40. Do they get insulted if I ask for 60 days?
I don't know that they're going to get insulted per se, but I don't know that I have a direct answer because that's going to vary. Like, obviously, every broker is going to prefer a shorter due diligence window than a longer one, just like they would prefer a faster closing date than they would. I mean, that's just common sense. Obviously, a broker gets paid, obviously, when the deal closes. So, look, I don't think it's egregious or insulting to ask for 60 days. And if you don't ask, you don't get. So,
EMD?
Yeah, earnest money deposit, dude. Usually that can be anywhere between $2,500 and $20,000. Right? I mean, this is a $3 million. Like, I think about when I sold my Mississippi portfolio. Let me do the math on that really quick. 2.49. It was about $4 million. No, it was more than $4 million. What am I talking about? It was almost $4.5 million. And I think the buyer's EMD was $20,000 and then another $15,000 after within, I think it was 72 hours after the expiration of the due diligence period. It's like $35,000 on a $4.5 million purchase. So what's that math? Let's see.
8%?
Yeah, 1% basically.
Oh,
yeah. A little less than 1% because 1% would have been if it was $3.5 million. So,
I was off by a decimal.
Yeah.
0.8%.
Yeah, 0.8. Exactly right. Exactly right. My calculator is only giving me 2 digits, not like going so. Yeah. But yeah, basically a little less than 1%. So yeah, brother, I mean, don't be offering. Now, look, last thing I'll share with you, and then we're really gonna wrap this thing. Sometimes you can strengthen your offer based on tweaking certain things, like a shorter due diligence period or a higher EMD, or giving them something like sweetening the deal. You don't need to come out of the gate blazing with your absolute best. But sometimes if you really want the deal and you feel like there's others, you can tighten up the offer, especially if you have access to the capital to put in as an EMD. But yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't come in with $2,500 down as an EMD. I'd probably be somewhere in the 5 to 10 grand range, maybe 15. But you can always, if that's a point of contention, you can always start with a smaller EMD or offer to start with a smaller EMD. And then within 48 or 72 hours of the expiration of due diligence, you can come in with like the bulk of the EMD. Just know that past the EMD, it's probably going to be non-refundable at that point.
Right.
Unless otherwise stated in the purchase and sale agreement based on title and based on other nuances.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
All right, brother. Well, hey, man, I'm looking forward to you talk about progress and momentum. So think about where we started 2 calls ago, this call and the last call, where we started there and where we're ending this one, where you're talking about taking a swing at an opportunity that gets you into your first deal, 32,000 square feet, where from day one, you should cash flow a little bit under $2,000 without money out of your pocket, with a potential to cash flow $4,600 a month, conservatively speaking. So this is the kind of progress and momentum we want to make and take, okay?
Yep, feels good.
All right, brother. Let's build on this. Massive imperfect action. Remember, attitude of progress, not perfection. And we'll connect in the next one, okay?
All right, Alex.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.